pagpapaliban ng Barangay at Sangguniang Kabataan elections ngayong taon. Lalo na ang iurong sa December 4, 2023 ang Barangay at SK elections.
For a fifth time, the Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections could just be suspended again in a vote of 264 to 6. The House of Representatives approved the rescheduling of polls from December this year to 2023. So what's the impact and cost to taxpayers and voters? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to The Chiefs. Ako po si Roby Alampay. Kasama po natin sa studio Ed Lingao of One News and joining us via Zoom, Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star, Luchi Cruz-Valdes of News 5. Chiefs, happy Tuesday.
Evening.
Happy Tuesday.
Ami, headlines natin.
Nag-ring na ibang-iba talaga ngayong panahon, nung nakaraang presidency hindi nagpupunta sa US. Ngayon, nag-ring si President Marcos ng bell sa New York Stock Exchange. And hindi daw niya ma-imagine a future of the Philippines without the US as a partner.
And we can't also miss the, some of the irony as well as the significance of his being there. We are on the eve of the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Martial Law. May mga mainit ang pagtanggap sa kanya sa New York and of course, meron din mga protesters na sumalubong sa kanya doon.
Oo nga siyempre. Pero mukhang okay naman yung reception kagabi, And we're waiting for his speech ngayon, mga 3 a.m. Manila time sa UN General Assembly. So, nakabanggitin din niya yung ganyang mga human rights. Yun ang sinasabi sa atin, di ba?
In the meantime, before we get to the main point that we're going to talk about today, Bok, ano bang mga binabantayan natin here on the home front?
Well, of course, you're looking at the House of Representatives passing on the third and final reading the postponement of the barangay and SK elections to December of 2023. Yet again, another postponement. But of course, it's only one half of the equation, or one-third. Wala pang Senate at wala pang approval ng Presidente.
Well, anyway, sige, on that note, ipasok na natin ang guest natin after a break. We will take this up. The Chiefs will be right back. Keep it here on One News. The House of Representatives has approved a bill that will move the Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections to December 2023 now. What happens now? Joining us via Zoom is former COMELEC Commissioner Luie Guia. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Guia.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here.
Hi, sir.
Evening,
Magandang gabi.
Good evening po.
Mr. Guia, if we weren't reading it, it's so hard to keep track now kung pang ilang postponement na to. How do you feel about the fact that we keep postponing this, and what ultimately is the impact?
Well, first and foremost, we've been pushing for electoral reforms and some bills that would be passed in Congress to reform our electoral processes. But the only bills that get passed easily every sessions of Congress, are election postponement. Nakakatawa ko minsan, and it gets so frustrating because essentially elections should be regular, and they should be periodic, and they should be held in periodic interval, because when the voters voted, it was to vote for officials for a specific term of office. Parang contractual yan. You hired an employee, 3 years lang yung kontrata nila, then it will be extended effectively if you postpone the election, because postponement bills usually comes with holdover provision. So parang there's already a conceptual problem there when you allow postponement, because the voters from whom the decision to hire public officials voted for them for a specific term when they in the election, when they chose during the election. So parang na-extend unilaterally. So that's the concept that I think is violated by frequent postponement of
historically
election.
what were the reasons, or what have been the reasons cited for the constant postponement of the barangay, in a sense that it's not given the importance that it should be given? Of course, this time they're saying, we'd rather use the money for ayuda, especially because we're coming out of a pandemic, etc., etc. But in the past, was it really financial?
From what I can remember, it has. Okay, sorry. From what I can remember, it has always been, money as being used as the reason for postponement. I can remember I was in COMELEC as early as 1993 or 94. There was supposed to be an election that time, and then COMELEC was really pushing to hold the election, but there's some kind of a pressure from the House or from Congress to postpone the election, and they say, we can better spend the money for something else. No, so actually it's really giving very low importance to barangay election, which is very unfortunate, because the people associate government with their barangay because that is where they can actually feel the government. So it's unfortunate really for people to be for barangay elections to be postponed, to be parating pinupostpone, no? Parang what kind of impression will it give to our
and yet it's the barangays that the congressmen and the LGU officials run to during the regular elections, right? Especially during the campaign period. I mean, paandar talaga nila. They're mobilized. Barangays are mobilized during the campaigns, no? And yet, when it comes time for their own elections, it's really ironic that the congressmen, back for postponement, at least for the last 5 times that those elections were supposed to be held.
Yes, well, obviously postponement is something that the incumbents want. They want, no? Kasi sila may gusto ng postponement para tumagal yung kanilang posisyon, ano? And of course, pag sila yung incumbent, sila yung may poder sa mga resources of the barangay and can more effectively campaign for whoever they would be campaigning for. And probably that might be one of the promises that that would be made by those who are elected, no? Ipupuspon na lang yung barangay. So magiging yun yung pangako nila, na apparently according to some, no, I think even Senator Marcos had a slip of the tongue. Ang sabi, parang nangako daw yung karamihan na mapuspon yung election. Kaya that's the
pinangakuan na ipopospone. Oh.
Yes. But definitely that decision is something that ignores voters.
Yes, sir.
No, because essentially voters, to me, I'm very strong about that. voters elected them for a particular term.
Yes, sir.
It's just like hiring someone for a fixed contract. And then the contract was unilaterally extended.
Yes, sir. Well, sir,
By,
sir,
Yes.
it's good that you brought up the significance of the barangay elections kasi a lot of people might be dismissive of the importance of barangays and barangay elections na parang hindi naman yung presidential election kung saan talagang at may attention ang taong bayan o senatorial elections for that matter. But in the end, it is the basic political unit of the country. So speak to us about that. How should people be viewing their barangays and the election of their barangay officials?
Actually, during the pandemic, that should have been an illustration of how important the barangay government was, no? Yung pandemic, yung mga pag-distribute ng ayuda, yung vaccination, pag-schedule ng vaccination, like in my place, the barangay even calls our house if it's scheduled for bakuna already, no? Ang laking bagay yun yun yung governance na nararamdaman namin. So I'm actually excited for the barangay election, only to be told that it's going to be postponed. So sometimes it's frustrating. And of course, it's also an opportunity for the people to change the barangay officials who did not perform well during the pandemic. And ito yung magandang pagkakataon na ramdam ng taong bayan yung kahalagaan ng barangay government.
So for all practical purposes, ito yung mukha ng gobyerno sa taong bayan.
Yes.
Yeah, in fact, yun nga yung other point. Kasi binanggit nyo kanina Sabi niyo, minamaliit yung barangay kaya postpone. In fact, it benefits the incumbent, di ba? You're giving them a term extension. At parang utang na loob yun ng mga lawmaker na they want to return a favor. Yun ang other point of view. Bakit gusto daw i-return yung favor? Bakit gustong-gustong? In fact, that's what Senate President Mig Subiri told us, naglalabi daw sa kanya sa office niya, yung mga barangay officials to postpone the election. Bakit nila gusto, di ba? That's for that term extension. Ngayon, ang tanong ko na lang, paano bang matitigil to? Because as you have said, it undermines the concept of elections. That the mandate has to be refreshed regularly, di ba? Paano bang matitigil to? Will it need legislation? Pwede bang COMELEC lang ang gumalaw para matigil na yan?
Well, the prevailing thinking is that it should be a law because it's the law that set the election to, let's say, December of 2022 this year. So only the law can only a law can extend it. So ganun yun. I mean, we elected people who will succumb to pressure from the barangay. So that perhaps we deserve the kind of congressmen we elected. Who actually, this is a disrespect for voters.
Yes, but to your point, and that's speaking specifically to congressmen who are voted by their constituents at their district level, how is the politics and the considerations different or similar at the level of the Senate?
Well, I think members of the House of Representatives might be more vulnerable politically than senators. Senators are supposed to, look at the bigger picture of this thing. So we expect the Senate to be more circumspect in deciding the question of postponement. I hope they would realize that, there is a bigger interest served by maintaining the regularity of election. Of course, you have the incumbents there, but you also would have challengers who might be better than the incumbents. And I would not like to deprive barangays with non-performing officials to get their chance to change those who did not perform well during the pandemic. And you're depriving them that opportunity when you postpone the election.
Now, sinabi naman ni Senator Amy Marcos na hindi daw sinertify ng kapatid niya na urgent yung bill And sinabi na nga niya, she repeated what the COMELEC chairman has said na kung ipopostpone daw by 1 year, aakyat actually yung expenditure by up to 18 billion from the current 8 billion. Ngayon, yung isang opponent sa House, si Congressman Lagman, sabi niya, unconstitutional daw yun dahil may fiscal autonomy ang COMELEC at hindi daw pwedeng i-realign yung 8 billion na yon for pandemic response. Is that correct? Tama ba yon? Na hindi pwedeng galawin yon. Kung allocated na siya this year for the elections, hindi na siya pwedeng gamitin for pandemic response.
Well, as a general rule, hindi talaga pwedeng gamitin kasi specific yung appropriations doon. Ano? Although sometimes may power ang COMELEC to use savings, no, para pag may savings na mangyari. But clearly, there is something that you will use the funds for, even if it were to be postponed 1 year after. So I don't think it can be it can be used. In fact, I think in all the postponement bills that or law that I checked, well, just a while ago, there are usually provisions that says the money should exclusively be used for the elections. No, I'm not sure how it will be, worded in the law that will. Well, I hope there will be no law, but if there will be one, I hope it would be. I am not sure how it will be worded finally.
Si COMELEC Chairman
But
Garcia was
actually,
quoted
si
as saying
Senator-
that it would be in the end it would be more expensive to postpone the barangay elections by a year kasi dadami yung botante at dadami yung mga presinto. Have you looked at this and does that make sense? Would it really be more expensive to postpone it versus to just shift the 8 billion to the pandemic?
No, I'm not sure about the computation of the current COMELEC, but yes, I think there will be more increase. There will be an increase of the cost because of, population expands, there will be more voters. At one thing more, nakaplano na to eh. This has been programmed last year pa that there's going to be barangay elections, and the way you allocate your budget have already considered the fact that elections in the barangay will be held. So parang meron na ring nagastos for that, no. Pag hindi matuloy, uulitin ulit yung mga ibang gastos like registration and all this thing for next year. Yung ganon. I mean, elections can be postponed. There are valid reasons to postpone election, but saving money is not one of them. Because, elections is the cost center of democracy. You really have to spend for democracy.
Well, see, Senator Amy Marcos, of course, she said that she lied, quoting Senator Miriam Santiago, where before she did not believe that the barangay elections should be postponed. Now she's really batting for postponement, but for her, the reason for doing that is to be able to solve down what she views as deeper issues. In particular, she feels that 3-year terms for barangay officials will be too short. And ang binabat niya ngayon, ang binapropose niya is 6 years. Anong palagay niyo doon? I mean, sa kanya kasi, it will make elections pati more regular in her mind, Parang, kumbaga, this is going to be for good. No more postponing, 6-year term, and then regular elections. What do you think of that? Will that work?
Well, assuming that is a reasonable proposition, why can't they just pass the law that, those who will be elected in December of 2022 will have 6-year term? So people will now be aware that they will be electing people who will serve for 6 years. No? Not to unilaterally postpone those who are already there who were elected only for a few years.
Siguro feeling niya too soon na. I mean, there's not enough time to actually pass that law, So, well, she's saying that 1 year will be a good time period for that law to be finalized and passed.
No, it's just a question of changing 3 years to 6 years. They can just put that in the law that they're going to pass instead of saying that, we will postpone the election
Amendment lang. Yeah.
for 1 year. Diba? I mean,
Yeah,
it's a
Mr.
simple assuming that it's valid. Or it's a reasonable proposition.
And Mr. Guia, now on a very practical level, on the now, let's take the other scenario that at the end of the day, all of these intramurals and all of these discussions comes to nothing and matutuloy ang barangay elections. But the fact that we are talking about this, the fact that we are spending time on this, how is this impacting preparations for the barangay elections?
I have been with COMELEC in situations where there are calls to postpone elections, no? So what we do is really just to push on our preparation, because we might be accused of not doing our job if Congress fails to pass the law, and we have no reason to not hold elections, and we might be even blamed. I'm assuming that I'm still with COMELEC. So COMELEC, I believe, will just prepare as if the election will push through. And that's why it's also important, I'm not advocating there, of course I'm personally against this, that if any decision would have to be made, then it should be made now, tomorrow, or probably right away. Because COMELEC needs to continue preparing for a December 2022 election. And in the process, it will have to spend funds for the preparation.
Where does that signal ideally come from?
Well, ang ginagawa dyan, nananansya ka eh. I mean, you try to feel how the discussion in Congress would be going on, would proceed, no? But really, I mean, it would be dangerous for COMELEC to just stop preparing for it because malakas na yung ugong-ugong for postponement. It would have to continue at least preparing for the election. And maybe you hire emergency casuals, because you need hundreds of thousands of people to help you in the logistics of election. And you have to be COMELEC should be preparing for that right now if we're talking about a December election. Hindi ho simple yun.
So kung December this year, how much time reasonably will COMELEC need to prepare?
Well, actually, they are actually preparing now.
Yeah.
I think there are already announcements as to the conclusion of printing and all these things. I am not following, but ideally, malinaw na yung nakaprocure ka na ng papel, okay na yung pag-iimprenta, malapit nang matapos dapat, because you will still have to transport and make sure that all the paraphernalia will reach the polling places in time for the election, and that's a massive endeavor, no? Malaking kwan yun in logistical work.
Well, just from the voter's point of view, how bad can it get if they just wait one more year and live it out with the incumbent barangay official?
Of course, voters will not have the opportunity to elect at the time that they should be elected. I mean, that theoretically that is what's going to happen, no? I mean, parang walang masama na nakikita kasi ano ba naman yung isang taon, that has always been. But conceptually, parang we disrespect voters, we disrespect the barangay, which was very crucial in taking care of us during the pandemic, or very crucial din sila na walang ginawa during the pandemic at maraming nangyari sa barangay natin. So why don't we just let the people decide on who their barangay officials would be, and reward those who have performed well and take out those who did not perform well? That's a basic feature of democracy, and by postponing the election, yun yung kwan. Pero pwedeng sabihin, what's 1 year? No? But, hindi yun eh.
Sir, let me just back up a bit and shift gears very, very quickly. I recall one of your many lectures to us about barangay officials and barangays that are theoretically not supposed to be partisan or should not be engaged in partisan political activities, which seems to be which seems to go against against the thinking of a lot of people na dapat ang barangay hawak ni mayor, hawak ni congressman. Tell us about what's allowed and what is not in terms of political activities of barangay officials and the logic behind it.
Well, mahirap yung definition ng partisan at non-partisan during barangay election. Medyo tricky din, because, unang-una, elections are basically political, and sometimes you have to, run with a platform, and necessarily you have to be joined by those who share your platform that you're carrying, no? So parang malabo nga yung pero ang ibig sabihin lang kasi ng non-partisan, yung essence noon, independent yung barangay to the other elected officials, no? So that is the ideal, but I admit that the practical siguro and the reality is far from ideal.
Okay, Mr. Luie Guia. Sir, maraming salamat po.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Maraming
Salamat, sir.
Thank you.
Luie Guia, of course, is a former commissioner at the COMELEC. And we will start up another conversation right after the break. Stay with us.
We can see the finish line. We are in a winning position. But now is the worst time to stop running. Now is the time to run harder and make sure we cross the line and reap the rewards of all our hard work.
One infectious diseases expert believes that the Philippines has a ways to go before seeing the end of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Kung matatanaw man natin, hindi pa siguro within the next 2 or 3 months, no? Kasi mataas-taas pa rin ang mga, or meron pa rin mga kaso tayong nakikita. Hindi natin pa rin ini-encourage na magtanggal pa rin tayo ng face mask. No?
Dr. Rontgene Solante pointed out that despite the decrease in COVID infections here in the country, the Philippines still ranks 5th in weekly COVID deaths worldwide.
Welcome back to Chiefs here on One News. The World Health Organization recently declared that the end of the pandemic is in sight. Is this the case for the Philippines? And sharing his insights is our SUKE, infectious diseases expert, Dr. Rontgene Solante. Doc, maraming salamat for joining us and welcome back to the Chiefs.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, Doc.
Evening, Doc.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir. Well, of course, yun nga, si Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus said the end is in sight. Of course, we're hoping he's referring to COVID. Well, your perspective here, is there anything to qualify here? Is there anything to contextualize here when he says that the end is in sight?
Well, Ed, no, when the WHO had mentioned that, it is based on the global trend in terms of the significant decrease, no, ang pagbaba ng mga kaso for the past months, no. Talagang ang trending is really going down, the new cases and the death are also going down, no. But again, hindi naman sinabi niya na within 2 or 3 months or within that. It's just something na if we will continue to get this trend of decrease in number of cases and decrease in death, then hopefully the site is already there that COVID will end as a pandemic. So we need to, on that context, nandun yung sinasabi niya na we need to run, but we need to be careful in running because we still continue to, what policies did we do that we see this number of cases going down and the number of deaths going down? At alam naman natin yan, no? More importantly is the vaccination, and second is the health protocol. No? But the problem, there are initial orders na magtanggal na tayo ng face mask or voluntary ang face mask sa labas. No? So I think we need to be consistent with our messages that we're not yet off the hook. No? Even cases are going down. There are still people who die of COVID. No? So yun lang yung implikasyon doon sa statement ng WHO.
But Doc, how do we look at it? Because on the one hand, yun nga rin ang sinasabi, nakikita ng mga tao, as you said, globally bumababa. And we know that in many countries, yun, wala na yung masking, especially in Europe, in America, and so on. Nando na sila, and then the global, if we're getting it right, the global numbers that you cited seem to suggest, hindi na nagmamasking doon, bumaba. On the other hand, when we apply it here in the country, we say there's something dissonant between our policy and the realities that we are still afraid of. So how exactly do we reconcile those two different ways of looking at it?
So, ang tingin ko dito, number one, hindi naman ganun din kalayo tayo, no? We need to look at our health system. Okay? Isa yan sa mga factors. When you benchmark with other countries, kagaya ng US, no? US is still the country with the highest number of deaths. But they're so bold in declaring na palapit na yung pag-end ng pandemic nila. Why? Because they can manage. They have a very good health system. They have all the antivirals within them. They have all the new Omicron variant booster with them. And comparing their situation with us, I think that's not correct, no? And boosted population. Ito yung problema natin. We know that there is always waning immunity. At nakikita natin yan, no? Experience natin. Ang sabi ko, as long as there will be community transmission and people are vaccinated but are not receiving boosted, they will always be transmitting and they will always be the source of the infection. Sino ang magiging talo dito? The vulnerable population. So which means that if the government is looking at this, and then they should ensure also, one, the healthcare infrastructure should be ready to accommodate if there are severe cases. Availability of antivirals, that has been very crucial in other countries, especially those who are vulnerable. Getting these antivirals are really life-saving, not developing the severe cases. And of course, our resources in terms of continue encouraging everybody to get the booster. I totally agree if the Philippines will move on with this pandemic and focus on other infectious diseases, but let's not forget, we still have to implement all of these policies to be vigilant with all these measures.
How should we view the rising positivity rate, the 17.6, from just a week ago, which was just at 13, if I'm not mistaken? How should we view it? Is this just a result of the loosening mask mandate? Is this just a result of more and more people going back to work? And should we, how much of the fact that this is all mild strains of Omicron, something that should balance out whatever fears we may have about this?
Yeah, that's an important observation, Luchi, no? Because even if the positivity rate is increased, hindi na na-disrupt yung buhay natin eh. Lahat lumalabas na. If they have symptoms mild, they know how to isolate themselves. They're taking antivirals, and after 3-5 days, they go back to work, no? And only a very few really are natatamaan at nadadala sa hospital. So I think this will be the trend of the situation that we will be having in the next 2 to 3 months. Lahat madadaanan tayo ng BA.5 because BA.5 evade the current vaccine But, ang importante dito, it will protect us against infection. So I would like to say this. There are three factors here. Bakit mataas pa rin ang positivity rate? It's mainly because of driven by the variant of concern. Mababa ang boosted population natin. Maski pataasan yung boosted population natin, matatamaan pa rin tayo. And that's why most of those infected, both vaccinated and unvaccinated, only have mild symptoms. And pinaka-pangatlo is really the mobility. Lahat tayo lumalabas na. No? So I think that will really be something na we'll be looking forward until lahat tayo madadaanan ng BA5 at sana hindi lang magka-severe.
Pero Doc, how accurate is the data? Kasi kahit ang World Health Organization, they acknowledge na merong underreporting globally, di ba? And in our case, halos lahat na ng taong kilala ko nag-antigen testing na lang At pag nagpapakit, hindi na nagre-report And even if they need hospitalization, kung hindi naman critical na hindi sila ma-ICU, hindi na sila nagpapa-hospital So how worried should we be about the accuracy of the data?
That's already given, na lahat siguro, let's say, 40% ng mga infected are on antigen test, no? And that's quite a high number. So talagang expected yan, under-reporting. And that's why I'm saying the end is not yet that near because marami pa rin nagkakasakit, no? Marami pa rin nagka-absent. Yung pagka-absent ko lang sa mga work mo, malaking bagay na rin yan, no? And yung mga matatanda na yung na-register natin na mortality, malaking bagay. Mortality, even one mortality is already significant. And we have not experienced this with influenza. No? So I'm taking this as something na hindi tayo kampante. No? Huwag nating ituring na itong COVID na to is just like flu. It's not. No? Because if you get this, meron pa rin mga komplikasyon. One, you will transmit this to your vulnerable population in the household. Yung long COVID, ang dami-dami na nating nakikita ngayong long COVID, maski mild infection lang, they have long COVID. No? So that's something na we need to deal. But we can deal with that, no? As long as hindi tayo magla-lockdown, hindi na tayo mag-restrict sa karamihan in terms of mobility, we can manage, no? But again, it's always we should always be careful in doing this na hindi tayo maging kampante because pwedeng tataas ang mga kaso at pwedeng meron talagang mamamatay because of the severe infection.
By way of warning lang, ano yung mga symptoms ng long COVID? The worst that people can expect. Kahit mild lang sila, pag nag-long COVID, ano yung the worst that they can expect?
Yung nakikita namin ngayon, no, yung tatamaan yung heart nila, no? So yung cardiac function nila hindi na ganun kaganda. In fact, there are those who retired from working na, hindi na pinapatrabaho because of the effect of that. Yung iba naman, hindi natatanggal yung hingal nila, nahirapan na silang So it affected them in terms of their functionality. Even if they are just mga 40, may mga nakikita tayong less 45 years old, napaka kawawa nito because that's also work loss, no? Na hindi na sa makapagtrabaho.
Sir, all this...
It's been a while since we heard of a new variant, no? Is that good news? I mean, kasi ang tagal na yung huling variant na narinig namin yung mga BA.5.2, mga ganyan, no? Parang wala na tayong bagong advisory on a new variant. Is this something that we should at beginning of the end?
Yeah. Hindi naman good thing kasi ang daming na-infect. No? The BA.5 is the most heavily mutated variant, no? So kung meron man sigurong lalabas na after BA5 na mas madami ang mutation, it will take time. It will take time. Kasi ito na yung pinaka-heavily mutated and a lot of us, those who were exposed, also develop antibody against it. No? So meron tayong mga cross-protection with previous infection or previous variant with this BA5. No? And in fact, magandang to dahil nadadaanan na lahat, meron na tayong antibody. So if there will be new variants of concern, it will still take time, no? Siguro 3 or 4 months after mag-wane ang immunity natin. Sana hindi mangyayari yan. But again, that's the tinitingnan ng mga eksperto ngayon, no? Na there will come a time that most likely we will be giving an annual or a biannual vaccination against COVID.
Sir, let me just squeeze in one more question before we let you go. So, ano yung trend dito for COVID-19? As they develop new variants or subvariants, nalulusaw yung severity ng virus, or is there still a chance that you'll have a new variant in the future that will go back to severe COVID?
Well, ang maganda dito sa trend ng mga variants, the latest variant should usually overlap and dominate, no? So nawawala yung mga previous variant, okay? Because the new variant, once you are infected, you develop an antibody, so mawawala na yung mga previous variant, no? So that's why if there will be variants that will be coming in the next few months, sana na hindi naman mangyayari yan, it will really be something more virulent and more transmissible than the BA.5. So that's where the problem is, because vaccines are usually formulated against a specific variant of concern. So mangyari niyan, ang mga pharma companies will also be hahabulin nila yung variant of concern, gagawa sila ng mga bakuna that will fit into that particular variant of concern. And that's why I'm saying there's a possibility we will be having an annual or a biannual vaccination.
Yes, sir. When you say more virulent, you mean more infectious. But I mean, what about a variant in the future that will be more severe in terms of symptoms? Is that still possible, or the trend is moving away from that talaga?
Malaking tanong yan, because as we experienced with the previous variant, so far it's only Delta, but Omicron also caused severe disease, no, or severe infection. So if it comes with virulence na mas highly transmissible siya, there's also a risk that it can also cause severe infection. And ang matatamaan talaga dito yung vulnerable population, which we are experiencing now, 65 years old and above, multiple comorbidities, no? Yung mga immunocompromised, sila talagang kawawa dito.
Okay. Dr. Rontgene Solante, sir, we'd like to thank you for your time tonight, and always a pleasure to have you on board.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Doctor.
and
Salamat,
good
Doc.
night.
Thank you, Doc.
Ingat, Doc.
Thank you.
And we bring in our last guest for the evening, live via Zoom, is Ann Dumaliang, a co-founder and managing trustee of the Masungi Georeserve. Good evening and welcome to the Chiefs.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Magandang gabi po.
Magandang gabi, Ann. Last we heard, at least last night, there were still some armed men at the periphery or at the perimeter of the Masungi Georeserve. Tell us the latest now. Are they still there, and have they been disarmed? Because we earlier heard that they were armed. Have they been disarmed? Were there any arrests made?
Right. So as of 2:00 p.m. yesterday, some policemen from the regional office of our PNP confiscated and took some 15 guns from the Guans and these men who are invading the area now. So these were confiscated, but they were not arrested just yet. These are guys, again, who have threatened firefight with us and who got physical with us Friday when we were trying to document what they were doing in the area. Yesterday night, Yusek Leones himself of the DNR said that the survey plan that these guys have been showing is not sufficient proof of ownership and that it isn't recognized by the DNR. And so from here, the question really is, why are they still in the field then? They have no reason to be there. They have no reason to be on this property because they don't have ownership over it. This is not a land dispute, as some co-opted or detractors would suggest. It's a plain land grabbing operation, and this is such an old style of doing land squatting. No, we should already be able to know these tactics by now.
Ms. Dumaliang,
So as of 8 o'clock, as of tonight, no, as we speak, they're still there.
Yeah, just a quick question. We do want to get on the nature of the land, and the nature of the reserve and everything. But before that, just a basic question. As far as you know, the firearms were confiscated by the police. On what basis?
Yeah, and why were no arrests made?
Because if that was taken out, presumably on the basis that these were illegal firearms or unregistered, then the next question obviously is why no arrests?
Right. So the explanation that was shared to us was that the unit who conducted this operations, the one in charge of security agencies, and so they could act insofar as looking at the licenses of the agency as concerned. And the argument that they were posing was because the firearms are registered with the agency, then it's the agency who should be held accountable for this, right? But again, now that we know that they do not even have a proof of ownership, and even DNR has confirmed that, then this agency serving this group has no reason at all to be on the ground anymore, and they should be taken out.
So who hired the security agency? Because that's what the police are saying. It's a security agency. You know, they have a license to operate. Who hired them?
Sungipal is the one who hired them, and he's working with a retired Major Joel Lino. They are the ones who are leading the occupation of this area, even if, you know, they're not recognized. No, it's...
Yun nga, Miss Anna, I wanted to ask you, why do we even try to establish ownership? Hindi naman pwede mag-own dyan, di ba? Is it the Masungi Georeserve a titled property of the Republic of the Philippines? Talking about
I also don't know.
Of ownership.
I also do not understand. It's very straightforward as far as I am concerned. No, at the point it seems that there was wrong information being fed to our decision makers and top officials, and there seems to have been efforts to deflect and undermine the issue. No, from the police. We've heard that the provincial office, to an extent, said that there were no unidentified men on the field, even if the regional counterparts have seen these guys and have confiscated 15 guns. Definitely not 0. Definitely not just 6. The DNR, someone from the ranks, I guess, have said that this is not within the protected area and therefore we cannot take action.
It is not within the protected area.
That's one of the...
It's not.
It is. That's what they're saying.
So who's supposed to be the final decision
I think that's what's bothering everybody. Parang
which agency, in other words, I mean, if this is owned by the state, which agency of government should be backstopping you, and for that matter, actively backstopping you? Which agency, in other words, is not stepping up?
Well, the DNR needs to step up. No, we need them to put their foot down and say that this should not be happening, give an order for all of this to go away. We ask really, and we appeal to President Bongbong Marcos na, DNR Secretary Yulo, DILG Secretary Benhur Avalos, and even the PNP Chief Azurin, no, to finally and once and for all arrest and evict these people. Because I don't see why not.
Yeah, but Ms. Dumaliang, just to be clear about that, because this has been going on for a number of days already, and clearly very, very urgent, and to your point, very blatant, very crude even. I mean, what has been the behavior of the DNR, the PNP, the DILG, all the agencies that you mentioned? What has been, how would you describe their response or action or lack thereof?
On the field, there are representatives of the PNP. They're just there. They're there, I think, the entire evening last night too. But they haven't taken action. They said they're waiting for instructions. We've had several DNR officers go on the ground. I think the general perspective is we will investigate this. We have more than enough data now. We can help you out with that. And again, it's titled to the Republic, all of these things, and it should be quite a given what should be the action that follows next.
Is the issue under litigation? Are there any legal issues involved?
Yeah, so There are no legal issues involved as far as I am concerned because it's just a survey plan that these people are holding. No? That doesn't need to go very far. Under the INAIPAS law, illegal occupation and selling of forest land is even a criminal act. No, the police can take quick action. I guess with guidance from the DNR, that's even better.
But Ms. Anna, let me go back a little bit. Let me go back a little bit. Kasi a few years ago, this was also an issue with Masungi. I remember Secretary Simatu, the Environment Secretary, even went there to try to enforce some DNR rulings. But eventually, the problem came back. So I suppose that goes back to Luchi's question. Why is it a recurring problem when at one point even the Secretary of the Environment already said that this is government property and there should be no squatters here? Where's the missing link? Who's supposed to do what?
Right. So I guess we go back to the nature of the memorandum of agreement that we have now, which is honestly something that involves the DNR secretary directly. Now, we already know that the Upper Marikina watershed, this particular area being so close to Metro Manila, has a lot of issues around land speculation. And when we talk about land speculation, this involves lots of vested interests, political interests in the local scene and the regional scene and the provincial scene, to the point na hindi siya nasusolusyonan. No? In the Upper Marikina watershed, for instance, though this area is particularly in the Kaliwa, pareho silang nasa watershed divide, no? Pero same context, no? Parang ang nangyari in fact in Upper Marikina when it was placed under the Protected Area Management Board, no? The forest covered decreased from 19% to 11%. So I guess to an extent that's telling also of the kind of support that's needed to make all of these things work in the field. And which is why the memorandum of agreement required that the counterpart with the ENR be coming directly from the office of the secretary so that meron talagang firm response to the inertia around taking action against land speculation in our protected lands. So you see this recurringly too. Each time we talk about the threats on the ground, each time we give an expose about things that typically go unseen, you will find people calling for the cancellation of our agreement and our reforestation project instead of actually addressing the environmental violators involved. So,
ano yung MOA ba yan? MOA lang with you, with your group? Kasi they were talking about 46,000 plus hectares, right? Ang laki-laki yan. And so many LGUs, right?
There are many layers of protection, no? There are many layers of protection on the land. Not only is it part of the protected area, but it also is titled land, and it is also under a reforestation agreement, a joint venture agreement too, with our organization and our group.
But are you partnering with LGUs, for example? Because, I mean, I don't know how it is possible for just one group to be, working with DNR, yes, but you're also having to deal with LGUs who are involved and who will have interests in that protected area, diba? How is that? Don't you need LGU support also?
We do. We definitely do, no? Protecting our protected territories isn't really just a job for the DNR. It does need a lot of people doing their share, no? The police, the LGU, because they also have their also local government codes. There are also, criminal activities na hurt our environment. Hindi dapat environmental laws lang yung pinagkakasalalayan. So there needs to be an active attempt to bring everyone together and contribute their fair share.
Yeah, Ms. Dumaliang, to that point, and final question na to. We are curious. Diba? I mean, just the fact, and obviously we're also thankful that you were there, your people were there to find this out, to sound the alarm, and so on. But to that point, and to Luchi's point, it's such a big area. what was your capacity, or for that matter, the capacity of other LGUs helping you out that at first allowed you to at least detect that this was happening? And even right now, what is your capacity to know that there are not other points of infiltration, that there are not other points of... I don't know, it's such a big area. I would imagine it's like, trying to detect pinpoints in a map wherever there is a vulnerability. How secure is the area now, and how strong is your and all the stakeholders' capacity to make sure that no other incursions are actually happening even now?
Right. That's quite a loaded question, but I guess we also have to contextualize this a bit further. The area that we initially were working on was about 400 hectares big. The reforestation site where this incident also happened, the larger Masungi Geopark project is about 2,000 plus hectares huge. So these are different levels of engagement with our organization. The entire Upper Marikina watershed is not something that we currently have, ground presence on. The idea of the MOA is to have this as a prototype and as a success story and have it replicated in other areas, not just in the Upper Marikina, but in other critical watersheds that need quick decisive, action that will restore these critical parts in record time. For us, we're fortunate because kahit paano, there's about 100 of us full-time financed by the conservation works, and the sustainable development and geotourism activities that we run. No? So compared to other protected areas where the last numbers I know of is 1 ranger is to 4,000 hectares is the average. We're quite better equipped in that sense, no? But again, like what I said, because land things are very political issues, we also really need the DNR secretary herself to be involved to make this work.
Okay, that seems very, very clear. Ms. Dumaliang, maraming salamat po.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Ann Dumaliang is co-founder and managing trustee of the Masungi Georeserve. And that is it for the Chiefs. We hope what was discussed will keep the conversation going. Ako po si Roby Alampay.
I'm Mami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Luchi Cruz-Valdes of News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.